Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. Here is this week's meals for you. So the very first meal we are going to get started with is a creamy Parmesan broccoli with bacon. Now I think the original recipe was actually intended to be like a side dish, but I decided to add a couple little other elements to it to kind of make it more of a full main dish, and it turned out really good. So to get started, we are going to take some bacon ends. I have a whole bunch of bacon ends in my freezer that I really should be using, but I kind of gravitate to the more long strips of bacon, so this recipe worked perfect to use bacon ends. The original recipe does say to use 5 ounces of regular bacon cut into strips. So you just want to saute those and just cook the bacon through. Once it is cooked, just put it on a lined plate and just set it aside. So what you're going to do next is you are going to take 2 pounds, or I think I used about 4 cups of broccoli, and you just want to lightly steam that broccoli. If you are using fresh broccoli, you can omit this step. I was just using a frozen broccoli, so I needed to get it not frozen. So one of the things I decided to add to this recipe to kind of beef it up a little bit, because again, it was intended to be a side dish, is I decided to put a little bit of mushrooms in it. So I took about 2 cups of a baby bell mushroom and I just sliced them nice and thin, added a little bit of the reserved bacon grease into a cast iron pan with about 2 tablespoons of butter, and I'm just going to saute those mushrooms until they are nice and cooked through and just delicious tasting. So again, we're going to use some of that reserved bacon grease again, and probably about 2 tablespoons again of butter, and we're just going to add the broccoli to the same cast iron skillet with a little bit of salt and pepper, and we just want to cook it lightly. I didn't need to cook it very long in the dish because I had already steamed it, but if you are using the fresh broccoli florets, then what you need to do is you need to cook it for about 6 minutes. You just want to stir it occasionally just so that it doesn't stick to the bottom, and you're going to try to get up some of those bacon bits off of the bottom. So once the broccoli is cooked through, you're going to come in and add about 5 cloves of minced garlic, and you're just going to stir that until it's nice and fragrant. And then next up, you are going to come in and add 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, 3/4 cup of a heavy whipping cream, and 1/4 cup of chicken stock. You can use vegetable stock also in this, and then about 1 teaspoon of paprika. I added smoked paprika to this, and it tasted so delicious. It just upped the ante with it. I love smoked anything. It's just, I love that flavoring. So you're gonna add 1/2 cup of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, and then another 1/2 cup of mozzarella cheese. You wanna just cook this until it is nice and cook through. Everything is tender. The recipe does say about 3 to 4 minutes. Then you're going to add the fried bacon back in. Give everything a good mix to combine the flavors all together. And then what you want to do is you want to top it with a little bit more cheese. Now I have my oven preheated at 375 degrees. Once you top it with the cheese, you're going to bake this for about 15 minutes until the cheese is bubbly and the broccoli is done to your liking. Then it does suggest to turn the oven on for the last 2 minutes onto a broiler, and that way you can just broil the top so it gets nice and crispy on the top. So one thing that I was doing on the side there was I was making some spaghetti noodles. Because I wanted to make this not a side dish, I decided to make this kind of like a pasta sauce. Amazing. So amazing. It turned out really good. So like I always say to you guys, I have left all of the recipes linked for you below in the video description for you, so that if you want to give it a try, it is available there for you. For the next recipe, we are going to make something that I really have wanted to kind of attempt to make for a really long time, but I've really been intimidated by the process. Every time I find a recipe online, it just makes it sound way more complicated than it actually is. But today was the day I decided I'm going to attempt to make this. Part of this pantry challenge is me trying to use cuts of meat in my freezer that I wouldn't normally use. We purchase our beef in bulk, like we get half of a cow, and so there's a whole bunch of cuts that I don't know anything to do with. So I found a recipe for pho. I'm probably not pronouncing it right. It may be called faux. I'll leave it down below so you guys know what I'm talking about. To get started with this recipe, what you need is 3 pounds of an oxtail, and you just want to put that into a very large stock pot and add 2 gallons of water over top of that. I didn't have a big enough stock pot, so I probably used maybe about a gallon and just a little over a gallon of water, and you just want to bring that to a full boil. And once it comes to a full boil, you want to reduce the heat down just to a simmer. So while that was coming up to a simmer, I was getting 2 onions just really roughly chopped and 4 inches of ginger, and we're just going to put that into the oven under low broil for about 20 minutes, just until they get nice and tender. So the other thing that you want to make up is like a little spice pouch. Now all as I did to make my spiced pouch is I took some really thick cheesecloth and some kitchen twine, and to that I added some star anise, some whole cloves, and 1 cinnamon stick that's approximately 4 inches, and then half a teaspoon of fennel seed. I will leave, again, the recipe below for you guys because I didn't use the same amount of spices that the recipe called for because I wasn't using the full amount of water. My stock pot wasn't big enough. One thing that you want to make sure that you are doing is scraping the scum off of the water while your bones are coming to a boil. You have to make sure that you are getting it off, and you just discard the scum. You don't want it. It's going to make your broth taste horrible. So once it comes to a boil, it will stop causing the scum because you're going to put it onto a simmer, but just make sure you're kind of coming in and just removing it off of the top. So once your onions and ginger are all cooked, what you're going to do is add that in to the bones and to the water, and then you're going to come in and add 4 pretty large bay leaves and your little sack of spices that you made. The recipe suggests using 2 tablespoons of salt. I did it and it turned out perfect with that amount. Now it also says to add half a cup of a fish sauce in here. I knew that half a cup was going to be way too much for us. I knew it was just going to overpower it. So I only came in and added about a 1/4 cup of the fish sauce to this. So you're going to cook this really on a simmer, low and slow, for about 6 hours. After the 6 hours, you're going to come and you're going to strain everything off of the broth. So you're going to take all the onions, like your spice pouch, your meat, everything comes out. You're going to add that broth back into the dish. Once your bones are able to be touched, like they're not super hot, what you want to do is you want to take the meat off of the bones and you want to add the bones back into that broth. And you're just, again, going to put it onto a simmer, and you're going to let it simmer for about another hour with just the bones in it. So while that was simmering, I was getting my rice noodles all ready. Now the rice noodles, you can just make them according to what the back of the package says. So my particular rice noodles just said to put them in cold water for approximately 20 minutes. And then after the 20 minutes, you're going to put them into boiling water and boil them for approximately 2 minutes. So while they were sitting there and everything else was doing its thing, I decided to get all of my kind of condiments that I wanted to add into my soup. I love having like everything available in my soup. I love just everything. So what I decided to do was cut up a couple of baby bell mushrooms and then shred a carrot up. One thing that we decided to have in our soup was some steak. Now the recipe just suggests taking a raw steak, and this is how they actually do it in the restaurants as well, is they just serve you up raw steak and the broth actually cooks it. I wasn't 100% comfortable with it, so what I did was I took our beef and just seared it on both sides. That way it was kind of heated up a little bit, and I was just kind of jump starting it a little. So there's my noodles all cooked. What you want to do is after you boil them for 2 minutes, you just want to come and rinse them with really cold water. If they start to stick again while you're trying to get everything else done, just run them back under cold water and it loosens the noodles back up. We didn't completely cook the steak. It is still very much raw, as you can see here. So I'm just cutting it into really, really thin slices. That is the key. You want super thin slices because you want that broth to end up cooking that steak. So once we got that all cooked or cut up, it was time to finally eat this soup. It had been filling the house all day with its amazing aroma, and I was so excited to finally get into this soup. So you're going to take some of that broth, and we used huge bowls because it's spa and we just love having, again, everything in it. So I needed a big bowl. So you're going to add your cooked rice noodles to that, and then you're going to add the beef. You don't have to add the beef. You can omit this step. You can go like completely vegetarian, or not vegetarian because it's cooked in a broth, but you don't have to add the steak if you don't want to. One thing that I am doing right now is to get some greens in is I am making my own sprouts. So I had some homegrown bean sprouts there. I added some onion tops. So as I'm cutting my onions, because I'm starting my onions, I'm just cutting the tops off, and so I put some of them in there. I have some cilantro, the carrot, and then I also hard boiled an egg, so I'm gonna throw that in there. Put some Hawaiian sauce and some sriracha on it, and oh my goodness, this is like my new favorite soup to make. It does take all day to make, but it is so worth it, and I am not intimidated anymore to make it. Definitely worth it. For the next meal, we are going to make such an easy chili. This comes together in really no time at all, and it's very easy to cater to whatever your family likes as far as the seasoning goes. So we are going to make a venison or a deer chili. You can definitely use ground beef for this. This is the original recipe actually calls to use ground beef in this. So what you're going to do is just brown up whatever meat you are choosing to use in your chili, and then once that's brown, you're just going to add in approximately 2 cloves of a minced garlic. I'm just using my pre-minced stuff, so just gonna get it thawed out a little bit in there. And then you're gonna come in and add 1 16-ounce can of tomato sauce. You can use 2 8-ounce cans if you would like. I find that I will actually end up using more than this tomato sauce later on in the recipe. We love black beans, so we use black beans in pretty much everything that would call for a bean. So you can add pinto beans or a black bean in this. You just want to make sure that they're drained and rinsed. And then you're also going to add 1 15-ounce can of a kidney bean, again drained and rinsed. And then just stir that up, and then to that you are going to add 2 tablespoons of a chili powder, 1 teaspoon of a ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of salt, and then 1/4 teaspoon of some cayenne pepper. And you're just going to stir that together. One thing that I like to add to it is I like to come in and add some jalapeños. I'm just choosing to use some of my pickled jalapeños in here. I probably added maybe about 3 to 4 tablespoons of it. And I also like to add a little bit, probably about 1/4 teaspoon to 1/2 teaspoon of liquid smoke. It just adds that extra smoky flavor to it. I like to also come in and add corn to this. So I'm gonna add 1 15-ounce can of my home canned corn, and then I added another 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. So I let that cook for about 1.5 hours, and you can see there that it is pretty thick. A lot of that tomato sauce evaporated. So I'm gonna come in and add another 15-ounce can of tomato sauce to this. After I added this tomato sauce, I let it cook for about another 20 minutes, and then it was completely done. Now this particular night was Super Bowl night, so we had a whole bunch of appetizers. So what I chose to do is actually put these in freezer containers, and these just went in the freezer. So really good for freezer meals as well. For the next meal, we are going to make a meat and potato casserole. That is the actual name of the recipe. It is just meat and potatoes. It is actually really good recipe, and it comes together pretty quickly. So what you want to do is you want to take probably about 4 medium-sized russet potatoes. The recipe calls for 3 to 4 cups of a thinly sliced peeled potato. So I'm just peeling them and then using my little slicer here. I'm very careful when using this because it is not a very safe tool to use in the kitchen. So I'm really careful when I use it. It's just speeded up a little bit, so I'm not actually doing it that quick. Next, you want to take a 9x13 casserole dish, and you just want to lightly oil it. And then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of melted butter to these potatoes and 1 teaspoon of some salt, actually 1/2 teaspoon of salt I added to it. And then you want to take the potatoes and you just want to kind of make like almost like a pie crust with it. You just want to line the casserole dish with the potatoes and just make sure that you're covering up any holes with the potatoes. You want to have your oven preheated at 400 degrees, and what you're going to do is take this kind of potato pie and you're going to cook this for about 25 to 30 minutes or until the potatoes are almost tender. Next up, you're going to take 1 pound of ground beef. Now you could probably use any type of ground meat in this. The recipe just calls for ground beef in it. You're just going to get it browned up. Now the original recipe actually recommends using 1 package or a 10-ounce package of frozen corn and just suggesting to thaw it. I chose to use some of my canned corn. Worked perfect, just drained it off, rinsed it off a little bit. Then you're going to add it to that cooked ground beef, season it with a little bit of salt and pepper, and just cook it until everything is cooked through. The recipe calls to use 1 can of condensed cream of celery soup. Now I love to make my own soup mix. It's so easy. I have left the recipe for the one that I go to, like my recipe below in the video description for you guys. But in the corner there, you can see I have a saucepan with a whisk in it. That is some cream of celery soup that I made from scratch. And what I'm gonna do to that soup mix is I'm gonna add 1 cup of a shredded smoked cheddar cheese. You can use whatever kind you like. And the recipe calls to use 1 tablespoon of a chopped onion. I just used some granulated onion in there. And then you're also going to come in and add 1/3 cup of milk. I just used a whole milk, and a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/8 teaspoon of pepper, and I just seasoned it with some salt. You want to mix that all together, and then you're just going to set it aside. So you're going to take your potatoes out of the oven once they are done cooking, and you're going to take your corn and meat mixture and just put that over top of the potatoes. And then next up, you're going to take your celery and milk mixture and put that over top of the potatoes, or over top of the meat, sorry. And you just want to make sure that you have it nice evenly coated. You're going to bake that uncovered in that 400-degree oven for about 20 minutes or until the vegetables are tender. And then what you want to do is come in and sprinkle it with probably about another 1/2 cup of cheese. You can use, again, whatever cheese you like. I just use that smoked cheddar. You're going to put it back in the oven for about another 3 minutes until the cheese is melted. And then it says you can sprinkle it with parsley if you would like. Stephen really liked this meal. I just found that it was a touch bit bland. I kind of like to have maybe something else to kind of make it a little bit more creamier in the center of it. It was just kind of dry. But other than that, it was a pretty good meat and potatoes casserole. For the last meal, we are going to do a sweet treat. We are going to make a pineapple coffee cake. As I was going through my sweet cookbook, I have 2 different cookbooks. I have one that I have like all my regular recipes, and then I kind of have like a dessert cookbook. I found this one buried in my dessert one, and I thought I would give it a try. I've never made it before. So what we're going to do to get started is we're going to take a 9-inch square baking pan, and we're just going to get it lightly oiled. And then to a medium-sized bowl, we are going to sift in 1.5 cups of an all-purpose flour. You could probably even use like a gluten-free flour in this as well. I'm just using an unbleached all-purpose flour. And then you're going to add 1 tablespoon of baking powder and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to that bowl. Now this recipe calls for 1/2 cup of crushed pineapples drained. I don't can mine crushed. So what I did in order to make crushed pineapple is I just drained the pineapple. I did reserve that juice and actually drink it. It is so delicious. And then I just dumped my pineapple into a bowl and used my immersion blender and just literally crushed it up. That is how you can make crushed pineapples very quickly. You don't have to buy specialized pineapple. You're gonna set that aside, and then you're gonna get started on your wet part of the batter. So you're gonna take 1/4 cup of butter, or 1/2 stick of butter, and I found that I had to just microwave it a little bit because you're going to beat it up with a 1/4 cup of sugar. I just use a organic granulated white sugar in this, and you're just going to beat it until it's nice and fluffy. Once that's done, what you're going to do is add in 1 egg to that. You're just going to beat it up a little bit, and then you're going to stir in or beat in 1/2 cup of milk. I just used a whole milk in this. I thought it would taste really good just to kind of have that extra cream in that milk. So you're going to mix that together until everything's well combined, and then you're going to add in that flour mixture. So that was your flour, baking powder, and salt mixture. And then you're just gonna mix that until everything's incorporated. What you wanna do next is fold in 1/2 cup of that crushed pineapple. You just wanna make sure that there is pineapple throughout the whole dish here. Now, one thing after making it and tasting it, I definitely would add that whole pint of pineapple. It does have a pineapple taste, but it wasn't quite pineapple-y enough for me, so I probably would actually add a touch bit more pineapple to it. So once you get it all stirred up and combined, you're gonna add it to your greased 9-inch baking dish. Next, you're gonna get a topping made for this. So in a small bowl, you are going to add 1/2 cup of a brown sugar. I just used a light brown sugar and I semi-packed it. You're going to add 2 tablespoons of an all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, and then you're just going to stir that again until everything is well incorporated. And I just kind of went in with my fingers because I noticed that the brown sugar was kind of clumpy and I didn't want really big pieces of brown sugar in it, so I just went in and made sure everything was crushed up. Once you get that all mixed together, you're going to come in and add a 1/4 cup of melted butter to that, and you're going to stir that again until everything is combined. Then you're going to take that topping and you're going to sprinkle it over top of your batter. over, and you're gonna cook this for 25 to 35 minutes. Now, depending on your oven, mine took exactly 35 minutes. Toothpick came out clean and it was delicious. Delicious, delicious, really, really good meal or snack, not a meal. Well, I guess you could eat it as a meal if that's how you roll. That is going to be the last meal for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, like I always say, I hope it gave you a little inspiration for your upcoming meals this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye, guys.